thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm really excited. This is one of my newer classes, so I'd love to hear any feedback that you may have. But one thing that I'll ask of you is I really enjoy engagement, especially in environments like this where we're on Zoom, because it tends to go a lot shorter than an in-class environment. So if it's okay with you guys, we're going to take just a quick break in the middle, but it's going to only be just about 2 minutes. Normally we give much longer. That way we can get out of here a bit early. So I hope that's okay with everyone. And the other thing that I'll ask is I will ask for some engagement, ask questions throughout. Because we're in a Zoom environment, I want to make sure that everybody's staying engaged. So I may have to ask questions or shout out somebody's name if we don't get engagement. So please make sure that you're sticking around to the entire class and get the most out of it. So with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. And if somebody can just open up your mic and confirm once you see my screen.
I see it.
Yep. Got it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So before I get started here, I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. Predominantly the agents that are focusing mainly on buyers. What are some of your struggles? What are some of your concerns with really moving over to the listing side of things? Because, there is the quote of you have to list to last. And of course, that's where a lot of, anybody that's ever built a team or a long-lasting business, it's come from the listing side. So before I get started, so I can understand where we kind of need to take the course, what are some of the challenges that you guys are having?
Micah, this is Cecilia. And I think a challenge I have is being able to provide pertinent statistics back to my sellers as to the type of traction the marketing is getting in the different venues. I don't have a good system in place for that.
Okay, perfect. We'll definitely go over a marketing plan that might help with some of the follow-up. Anybody else? Anybody never listed a house before? Awesome.
I've never listed a house.
Okay. Is that Ryan?
You're correct.
Awesome.
My first list.
I've only listed one.
Okay. And can you guys share maybe some of your experience and struggles that you had?
I don't really think I had any struggles.
Awesome. We're with a room full of rock stars. Cool.
Okay.
Getting more listings is a struggle.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Great. We'll go over all those different things. Not so much on the prospecting side of things. We'll go over, sorry, I'm getting a call. Let me hang up here. Every time I get a call, it likes to kick me out of my screen. Okay, back on. We'll go over a little bit on prospecting because if you become a really strong listing agent, obviously that's going to help your prospecting business and help referrals. But really this is going to be more geared toward getting the house to sell as opposed to prospecting. But appreciate all of everyone's feedback. I recognize a lot of names on here, but for those of you that don't know me, my name is Micah Mruwat. I'm a broker associate with eXp Realty. I've run a team prior. I've been a managing broker before and a regional director over the course of over 10 years. And so been through a little bit of everything. Also a real estate investor. I really consider myself an investor first. Second generation real estate investor. Last year I was named top 100 in the top 100 magazine for real estate. And then January this year named one of Oklahoma City's social media influencers. Married and have two wonderful boys that had their last day of school via Zoom yesterday. So I'm in the same boat as many of you and understand the challenges of growing your business and, still maintaining that home environment. Before we get started here, I do have a disclaimer. And of course, a lot of us are going to be in the same markets, but I do want you to check on anything that you want to use from this course moving forward, check with your local guidelines and of course your managing broker. So some of these things will be a bit vague, but intentionally, as I want you to check with your managing broker, because every brokerage of course is going to have different guidelines. So the first thing I want you guys to do, and I always start with this if you've taken any of my classes, is it's mindset first. And I want you to start with defining your goals. And so the first thing I want you to do is define your big why that has to drive you every day. So you'll hear me quote throughout this, I am a huge Tony Robbins fan. If you guys haven't checked him out, definitely highly recommend him. He is a wonderful coach. But he says that your why has to make you cry. And the reason for that is when we go through tough times, I can't remember who said that they just had a listing and he didn't have any struggles, which is absolutely awesome. But those of you that have been in business a while, you know that struggles are going to come into real estate.
Yeah.
And so when we have those struggles, we have to really define our why to get us through those times. So I want you guys to get a pen and paper. Like I said, this is going to be a very interactive class. And I want you to write down your why. And just keep in mind, your why needs to make you cry. I know we hear about it. I know it sounds a little cliche, but I promise you it works, because if you haven't defined why you're doing what you're doing, then you really don't have anything to push you through those hard times. So we're going to take just a pause, 30 seconds. And if anybody wants to share, I'm going to mute my mic.
I want my best days to be ahead of me and not behind me.
I want my best days to be ahead of me. I love it. That's great. Thank you. Anybody else? And I believe that was Mandy. Is that correct? Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate you for sharing. One thing that I would ask of you is kind of define what your best days look like. So we really want to become very detailed with our why. So what does that look like for you? And like I said, you want to drive some emotion to it.
I think for me, that's just having freedom financially, emotionally, space to say yes more than I say no to my family, to the dreams that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. And one thing that I would also, counter to that is write down what's going to happen if you don't reach those goals. I always kind of like to put myself in that position. How am I going to feel? So that's awesome. Thank you so much. And you mentioned financial goals. And so you mentioned freedom, you mentioned financial goals. And I really want you to kind of go back to, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, of why you got your real estate license. Because I believe a lot of us get a real estate license for time freedom, financial freedom. So you have to ask yourself, are you meeting those goals? And the reason, I know it sounds cliche, but the reason why I start with much of this, I'm going to go ahead and see, I can't mute her. Oops, sorry. The reason I start with this is we can teach all the tactical stuff all day long, but unless we have our mindset right, then really none of this matters. So that's why I always start with goals and mindset. And the next thing I want you guys to write down is how many transactions do you want or need per year, right? We all have different goals. Some of us may have another job and we want to list, a few homes a year. Some of us may want to build a team. Some of us want to leverage through other mediums. So what does that look like for you? How many transactions do you want or need in order to meet your financial goals? And we won't ask you to share those. Those are personal. The next thing is I want you to write down your hourly worth. And if you've taken one of my business classes before, you should already have this number. But basically, you're going to average out your gross commission, how many transactions, how many hours you work every single week. And when you divide that all out, you'll find out your hourly worth. And the reason this is so important is this is what's going to help you to be able to leverage and delegate other tasks. Because let's say, for example, your hourly worth is $80. Well, it's now easier to delegate and to, sorry guys, I got a call. I need to learn how to turn that off so it doesn't keep kicking me out. you learn how to delegate the $10 task if your hourly worth is, say, $50 or $80, right? The other reason this is so important, especially as a listing agent, is you're no longer focused on just going after appointment after appointment, just kind of throwing it at the wall and seeing if it sticks. You want to increase your conversion rate, somewhere I would say between 75% to 95%. So right now, if you're looking at a 25% ratio or a 50% ratio, we want to see how we can increase that. And part of that is building confidence within yourself. So if I know my hourly worth, for example, is $80, and I'm going out on this appointment, how much of this appointment is actually costing me on the back end? Because time is money, right? Time is money. It's time that we could be doing something else. And it's also time taking away from our family. So when you know that, and you know how much it costs for you to go on to an appointment, you're going to be 100% sure you're going to get that appointment. So you're no longer going to go after sellers that, may or may not sell, because that's really my goal by the end of this, is every listing that you take, you're 100% sure that it's going to sell. Some are going to sell faster than others. But again, you want to make sure that you're in the ballpark. And then how many appointments do you want to go on per week or per month? Okay, so write that number down. Okay. Do you want to go on a couple listing appointments a month? Or do you want to just go on a couple a week, or just a few a year? What does that look like for you? And the next one, more importantly, is how many listings can you handle personally? Because we all have shout out these goals, but we need to be realistic with ourselves. How many listings can you personally handle before you start leveraging others? Now, once you hit that threshold, are you willing to leverage and delegate for additional support? What does that look like for you? We'll get to that in a little bit more detail later on. And then I want you to create a vision, a one-sheet business plan. If you haven't taken my business plan class before, just shoot me a message after this and I'll share with you my one-sheet business plan. And it's intentionally a one-sheeter. I don't want anything too in-depth, because then you won't ever revisit it. So it's something that can literally sit on your desk. You can look at every single day and make sure that you're staying on track. So I want you to create a vision for yourself, especially in times like this right now, with many of us going through the COVID-19, working from home. Our lifestyles have changed, right? It's more important than ever to have a business plan in place, because I guarantee you your business plan has changed since January 1st. Am I right? So with that, you want to have that in place so you can keep yourself motivated and keep yourself on track. And the next is we have to get rid of our limiting beliefs. So I know somebody mentioned, how do I get more listings? I promise you, there's actually a bold law, what you focus on expands. I promise you, if you focus on getting more listings, you will get more listings. Because guys, the fact of the matter is, we are in one of the best industries out there. We, are part of one of the three necessities, right? Food, water, and shelter. And so everybody needs to buy a house. Everybody needs to rent a house. Everybody needs to sell a house. Everyone needs a household. So we have to get rid of our limiting beliefs, and we have to look at ourselves as somebody coming from service and that we're helping others. When we believe that we're bothering people or that we shouldn't be calling them, then of course that's how you're going to come off. So, one thing we talked about last week in our script masterclass was, going after expireds and for sale by owners. Guys, these are sellers that have literally raised their hands and said, I'm willing to sell. You can even go to Zillow, and there's a thing called Make Me Move, where people have said, hey, at this price, I would sell my home. So why not give those people a call and show them how you can service them? But through this, we're going to see, we're going to develop a marketing plan. We're going to develop a way that we are unique into marketing to our buyers, where all 24 of you that are on this call today are not in competition with one another. And then the next one here, you are paid directly proportional to the service you give. So if you want to get paid more, you're going to have to serve more. Am I right? We're in the service industry. So I love that one, because, we often talk about our goals, but we're not putting them into action. We move our little video here. All right, so the first thing I want you to start with after you've developed your business plan is you need to brand yourself. And so I want you to create a personal branding that's in alignment with the brokerage. So again, I mentioned, I apologize, I think I've got Deborah and Ryan, if you guys can mute yourselves, or Stephanie, if you're able to mute everyone. So create a personal branding in alignment with your brokerage. I say this because every real estate brokerage has different guidelines on what you can do with personal branding. And of course, you guys are in Oklahoma, so you want to pay attention to OREC guidelines as well. But I do encourage you to create a personal brand, because the fact of the matter is, the general public knows Deborah for who Deborah is, or Mandy for who Mandy is, and doesn't really associate you most of the time with the brokerage that you're affiliated with. So you're building your own brand. And the reason you want to do that is you want to maintain top of mind awareness. Okay, so if you see here to the right, I have the Nike sign and Apple. We can just see these logos and automatically know what they entail, right? And Ryan, do you mind just muting your mic? I can hear some feedback noise. And once you have developed a brand and you stay top of mind, so we're going to talk about consistency a little later on, you want to show that you're a realtor for life, right? You live, breathe real estate. And also, I love to develop a way to mix professional and personal. So how can you marry the two to where being a real estate agent is no longer just a job, it's just a way of life. As we all know, it's not an 8-to-5 position for the most part. And you need to share your success stories. Don't be afraid to share your success stories. Don't be afraid to toot your own horn. Guys, this is not about your ego. This is not about, others, of course, may see it different. But how are you going to show the world how great of a real estate agent you are unless you're willing to share your success story? So don't be afraid, and don't listen to all the other buzz that may say indifferent. And with that, you want to share testimonials, but not just any testimonial. For the most part, many of us are not going to read through a testimonial any longer. But go ahead and take it a step further and get video testimonials, maybe an interview style, or somebody just, shooting something pretty informal. It doesn't have to be any professional video work. I would keep it 30 seconds or less, because we, unfortunately, in the day and age with social media, we have the memory span of about a goldfish, or the attention span rather. And so the shorter that you can keep it, the more attention that you're going to get. And then when you're looking at your website, look at your website right now. If you don't have one, I highly suggest you get one. You have to be on the web right now. And look at your website. And is it about you, or is it about your client? Is it about you and all how great you are, or is it about your client and how you're going to serve them? So your site isn't about you, but rather your results. You want it to be results driven. Consider yourself a real estate coach. That's what we are. We are real estate advisors, coaching our clients through the biggest transaction of a lifetime for the most part. Okay, that's what we are. And we'll talk about being the communicator, being the messenger, because this is one of the number one reasons why I see agents bust deals, is because they don't know how to communicate. And then we have to prepare for all seasons of business. So right now, they would probably consider that we are in the winter season of our business. But the interesting thing is, if we have our mindset right, winter is where a lot of the big name companies were founded in a winter season. So in a down market, how are you preparing for the spring, the summer, and the fall? So what you plant now is what's going to harvest later on. So make sure you're preparing for all seasons of business, not just when it's good. So the next thing I want us to look at is create a seller interview. So when you've secured the listing appointment, you're going on the listing appointment, maybe they're interviewing 4 other agents. So how are you going to stand out? And you want to set the proper expectations, because again, I've been on a lot of listing appointments with other agents, and we're not looking in the mirror. We're not treating ourselves as professional. We're letting the clients dominate and control the conversation. So we don't want to do that. So don't buy your listing. Okay. What I mean by that, we're not here to go just stick a sign in the yard and see how many listings we can get. And again, throw it at the wall and see if it sticks, see if one sells. If you do it properly, you're investing your time. You may be investing money for staging and photography, which we'll get over into detail about. But more importantly, your time. And if you treat yourself as a professional and you know your hourly worth, how much are you investing to get that listing? So I know in any given listing, I probably have $400 or $500 invested before I even put my sign in the yard. So I refuse to take a listing that I don't believe will sell. Again, as I mentioned, some are going to sell faster than others. So we're not necessarily looking at the days on market, but we are sure that we can get it sold. And then I want you to ask good questions. Part of being a good real estate agent is asking good questions. You're becoming the interviewer, and you're pausing and you're listening. And then, of course, take notes. And the reason taking notes is so important is it shows that you care. Okay. So you're not just walking through the motions. It shows that you care and that you're genuine. And so take notes. Sorry, I'm trying to cancel these calls before it kicks us off here. And then, are you listing to sell, or are you setting it up for another agent? Again, that's where are you buying your listing? So are you listing it because you're going to secure the sale and you're going to get paid at the end? Or are you just setting it up for it to expire out for somebody else to swoop in? Okay. Consider every listing an investment, because it essentially is. It's an investment of your time and it's an investment financially. So consider it an investment and you'll look at your listing completely different. As I mentioned, control the conversation and the outcome. It doesn't be manipulative. It doesn't mean be salesy, but you want to control the conversation and show them that you're the professional. So what I mean by that is, don't every time you say something, well, what do you think? What do you think? I can't tell you how many times I've heard agent conversations. No, you're the professional. They have hired you to let them know what you think about the property and how you're going to get it sold. And the next thing is the seller pricing within the ballpark? So the reason this is really important is I always like to give a ballpark range. I'm typically not one that says, okay, you have to list it at 200,000. I'll say, I believe we can come in 195 to 205, absolutely maximum. 205 may be at the top, but I believe we're still in the ballpark. And I let them choose their price point, because most of the time they're going to go right there in the middle. And I'll explain to them the differences. Well, if you list over 200, then you're going to get buyers that are looking potentially between 200 and 250,000. But if we list it slightly below 200, let's say, for example, right at 200 or 199, there's an advantage to listing it at 200, because you've now got two sets of buyers. You've got the buyers looking from 150 to 200, and the buyers looking from 200 to 250. So the advantage to that is, let's take the buyer from 150 to 200. If you listed it $1 over 200,000, then that means you've just eliminated that entire pool of buyers. So I'm not coming in and saying this is exactly what you have to list it at. I'm giving them a ballpark range, and then I'm allowing them to come up with the conclusion themselves. Okay. And you guys feel free to open up your mic if anybody has any questions in any of this. So, and are you being competitive with the active, pending, and sold listings? So when I pull my comparative market analysis, I don't just look at the sold listings. Of course, that data is very, very important in pricing the home. But I also look at what's active and what's pending. And the reason what active is so important is because I have to make sure our property is competitive with the other listings. So if there are 7 homes in their neighborhood, I need to make sure that we look the best, our listing looks the best, we are priced accordingly. So actives are just as important, in my opinion, when pulling a CMA. And is your seller willing to participate in a staging consult? I will not take any listing that the seller does not participate in a staging consult, because I do believe, and I've been doing this for years, that staging alone sells the house. And so when I'm talking about staging, I'm not talking about you financially investing into going and having furniture staged in an entire vacant home. I do that for my personal investment, so I put my money where my mouth is. But what I do offer my clients is a staging consult. And so what that is, my stager will come in for about an hour. She'll walk through every single room. She'll take notes and she'll make suggestions. Then she's going to print out a full report and email it to the sellers with suggestions. And so pretty inexpensive things that they can go and purchase, they can declutter. So that is very, very important. And we'll get into detail about staging a little later on. So how flexible is your seller with showings? Are they the type of seller that's going to cancel every other showing, or are they going to be really flexible? And that really comes down to their motivation. So, I had a seller not very long ago that they wanted to be very particular about their kids' nap times and this, this, that, and the other. And then even under contract, they wanted to be particular when the inspector was scheduling. And so I just kind of had to be firm with them and said, it's in your best interest to work around these showings, because we are on the market for sale, and the likeliness of us getting buyers to come back is very difficult. So it's in your best interest to be able to work around these showings. So you just have to be firm, again, not manipulative, but you're controlling the conversation. And then ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated is your seller? If your seller's not very motivated, then they're going to give you difficulties throughout the entire process. So you do want to ask yourself, how motivated are they? Do they have a vision on where they want to go, or what are the reasons they're wanting to sell? And so when you're looking at the seller interview, you want to interview them more than they're interviewing you. Okay, I'm going to say that again because it's really important. You want to interview them more than they are interviewing you. Okay, so a lot of agents are going into seller interviews, thinking that they're in competition with other listing agents, but you want to show them that you are 100% sure you're going to get the listing, that you're not even looking at the competition, you're not even looking at who else is in the running, if you will. And so you're actually interviewing them. Do you want to work with them? Because you are such the professional that you are so picky with the sellers that you work with. Do you want to hire them? And I guarantee you that will change the mindset. Okay. All right, so we talked about walking in with 100% certainty. So you do want to assume the sale. Okay, confidence is key here. So you're going to walk with confidence as if the listing was already yours. So if you believe in your heart of hearts that the listing's already yours, do you think that you're going to walk and talk a little bit differently? My guess is that you will. So you don't want to ask too many questions, as I mentioned, as an interview, and show uncertainty. So what that means is, well, I think you should list at $199, but what do you think? Right? It just shows a lack of confidence. So you want to show the data. Here's the ballpark of where I think you should be, and here are the reasons why I believe you should be at this number, but let them choose, but you're still showing the certainty of going off the data, right? You want to come to the meeting ready with your listing agreement and marketing materials in place, okay? You're walking in, again, as I mentioned, you're assuming the sale, so you're walking in as if they have already hired you. So let them know that you have the listing agreement. And the reason you're going to do this is you want them to commit. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. So the next thing you want to do, please don't walk in and do a 30-minute listing presentation. I hate listing presentations, is my personal opinion, but it's from being on a lot of interviews. And let's just be real. They don't care about you. They don't care about how great you are. They care about your results. So what I want you to do instead is you either can have it in paper when you go or email it to them prior, and you're going to share a specialized marketing plan for the seller. So no standard listing agreement. That's how great I am. This is how great my company is. The fact of the matter is that does not help their home get sold. So I want you to have a specific marketing plan to what you're going to do in order to get their home sold. Okay. And we talked about having the listing agreement. So the next one is be ready to get your sellers to commit to the stager and the photographer. So what I do is I walk in, I ask for them to give me a tour. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to show that I'm taking notes. I'm going to interview them. I'm going to show them that I have the listing agreement with me in hand. And then once I'm done interviewing and I've decided I want to work with the client, then I'm going to get them to commit on scheduling the stager and the photographer. So I'm going to have my stager right there. I'm going to text her and let her know to be ready and say when works for you to go ahead and have the stager come out. Okay. So I let them know my timeline. For me personally, my timeline is the stager comes out, depending on how many things we need to do. We might need a week, and then we schedule the photographer, and she needs about a week's notice as well. So I set up those expectations of how long it's going to take, and we need to get this on the schedule here pretty quickly. So if you show or feel doubt that you're not going to get the listing, the sellers are going to sense it. Okay. They're not dumb. They're going to be, watching every single movement that you make. They're going to be watching your language. So language is key, but more importantly is your mindset. So mindset is the number one reason for failure is your own mindset. So if you are questioning that you're going to get that listing agreement, then that's what's going to happen. So how do you create a specialized marketing plan? So I want you to think about how are you going to market your property outside of the MLS, okay? As we all know, if you want to actively be marketing and get your home sold, it's much more than just putting the property into the MLS. So how we're going to do that, and this is just an example I have. Man, I'm just so sensitive here. Okay. Can you guys still see my screen when I switch out of the presentation mode? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here's just an example, one that I created years ago. So I had a 52-point marketing plan. And this just went over every single thing that we did. So I'm just going to kind of run through it. You guys can take notes on if there's anything that you like or dislike. But pre-listing consultation, pull comparables sold in the neighborhood and compare to location, condition, and of the prospective property. Initial staging consult, we just talked about that. Remove valuables, firearms, personal photos. This is really important. I mean, firearms especially, a lot of us forget about it, and even medications. Outline important features and upgrades. So ask them, what are some of the important features? Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get more money for the home, but what was important to them? Why did they purchase the home? Because most of the time, the reasons that they purchased the house are going to be features for another incoming buyer, okay? So we want to look at those things. Provide a detailed report instruction for seller to prepare the home for market. As I mentioned, that comes from my stager, not from myself. And then we're going to do a final staging consult. And right now we're doing a lot of these via FaceTime or Zoom, where they're just walking her through the property right before the photographer comes out. So we're going to schedule the professional photographer next. Listing agreement with the start date. So, we probably will sign the listing agreement and then have a start date whenever we anticipate the staging and the photography will be done. Then, of course, you're going to put into the MLS, fill in all the MLS data and double check everything, including school districts. The reason I have this in here is even long ago, before school districts were required, I can't tell you how many agents did not put that information in, and they were missing out on buyers. They were doing their sellers an injustice, because if buyers were looking for a specific elementary school and you didn't have it in your MLS data sheet, then that's not going to pull up in the search. And it's the same with everything else. Fill in as much of the MLS data as possible, so that way you're hitting more searches. Okay, don't be lazy. We're just going to be real. That's just lazy. Syndicate to listings. The company I'm with syndicates to over 900 websites. So what does your syndication look like? Upload your entire, this is stuff just kind of personal to my brokerage, so we'll skip over that. Zillow, Trulia input, of course, make sure all that data is correct, because trust me, as soon as you message your sellers that you've gone live in the MLS, what are they doing? They're Googling their address and they're checking Zillow and everything else. So I also let them know, don't do that, because it's going to take a while to syndicate to those sites. But yet, even though you've informed them of that, they're still going to do it. So create a Facebook established page with the address, invite friends, other agents, and invite the seller to invite their sphere. So when I mention of why a seller purchased a home, you would be shocked of how many times the sellers actually know the buyer's incoming. I just had one in Norman, actually. And so why did they purchase the home? Because their sphere may actually be interested in the home as well. Now the next one, request list reports from a title company. A lot of title companies are offering it for free these days. So you can get all the data of, local restaurants, school statistics, all kinds of things, and you can have it in a nice little list report. Of course, install your property sign. And then not only do I have my property sign, I'm going to have a designated text code sign writer, property specific. I personally do this one instead of flyers these days because, as you guys know, people just pick up flyers and they run off and you never gather their information. I like text codes because the platform that I use, when they text in, then I'm going to lead capture their information on the back end, and I can literally call them and answer questions while they're sitting in front of the sign. If they don't answer, then they've at least gotten the information that they're looking for. So always looking at ways how we can provide value, but we can also lead capture off of that. Install an MLS lockbox or various lockbox as you wish. Set up showing assist, seller preference, text versus email. I usually recommend both so they can keep a log. Run Facebook ads and virtual tour squeeze pages, share property with other agents and prospective buyers, weekly reverse prospecting, email and call. So I do this faithfully every single week, sometimes several times a week. So I will go into the MLS, go in and look at if you click the edit the property, and then you can pull up the reverse prospecting and update the dates, see who has matched your property within that week. And I don't send the default email because we all know that we're going to just delete it. So I send something more personalized, and it's usually something of, hey, Sarah, this is Micah. I just saw that you had a buyer that matched the property. I just wanted to let you know we did a price improvement to whatever dollar amount. Also, here's a short virtual tour. If you'd like to share it with your buyers, please let me know if you have any questions. So it's something very specific. I'm adding valuable information that we just improved the price if we happen to do that. And also sending them a virtual tour link, especially right now. That way they can send that to their buyers and see if they even want to go look at the property. And I notice every single time I do that, we get an increased showings. So here we are, live video published to Facebook. It does not have to be anything super professional, you guys. If you don't like to be in front of the camera in this day and age, especially, you have to get over it. I know Sarah Smith's on the call. She's great at doing Facebook Lives. I'm sure many of you are as well, but I just happened to see hers. So Sarah might have you chime in if you have any tips on that. And then open house per seller preference and availability. Brokers open again per seller preference and availability. I let my sellers choose if they want an open house or a broker's open. And of course, I'm not talking about times right now with COVID-19, but I let them decide because you're going to have some that want it and you have some that don't. So I explained to them the pros and cons of both. Personally, I don't tend to do open houses myself, but I let them know that I have a lot of agents within my group that would be more than happy to if that's something that they want as part of their marketing plan. So we'll talk about brokers opens in a little bit. I'll show you how I do them differently. Weekly updates to the seller. So I know somebody was talking about stats and keeping up to date with their sellers. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but make sure that you're keeping your sellers in the know, even if you don't have a lot of information to share, but just let them know, check in with them and let them know that you're thinking about them. Obtain feedback when possible. And then one thing that when I was heavy into listing is I always entered every listing into the Oklahoman listing of the week. Okay. Now, you're not going to get every single one, of course, otherwise they'll probably get tired of you. But you let them know that you're at least going to try to enter them in, and that might get them some additional exposure. Once you've been on the market for 2 weeks, that's when I let them know we're going to reevaluate the comparables, the property, and the activity. But I let them know that before we even list. So I'm saying we're going to list at $200,000. But we're going to reevaluate 2 weeks from now because my data shows me that we should be under contract within 14 days. So if we're not under contract, then we need to reevaluate. Now, you may have data that shows it takes longer to sell. I certainly have some listings right now that I knew that would take longer. So you have to adjust that accordingly. Schedule a marketing and price point plan if necessary. What I mean by that is, let's say I gave them the ballpark of 195 to 205. And they decided to list on the higher end of 205, okay, we're going to secure that price point, but you're going to commit to me, and we're going to write this down with signatures. Instead of me having to haggle them for price reductions every single week, we are going to actually schedule out price improvements, and they're going to sign off on it. So we're going to say, okay, week 1, we're starting with this. Week 2, we're going to go to this point. And then that's going to help you keep you at the top of the search engine as well. Evaluate offers and best options with sellers. Keep all parties properly advised. Request pre-qualification letters from any and all offers. Provide the seller net sheet. Of course, we all have to do these things. Execute the contract, order the title work, schedule inspections, appraisal, negotiate the TRR. And if you can see here, many of these things we already do, but just showing them in paper all the different steps of what we do, they'll be blown away because they think we just put a sign in the yard, we put it in the MLS, and we're done. Am I right? That's why for sale by owners exist, because they don't realize what all is involved in our daily activities. So that's why I have the 52-point marketing plan. Create your own. It can be more detailed than this, but I just wanted to share with you guys mine. And here in about 10 minutes, we'll just take a short break. So make sure you perform your marketing plan. So don't say that you're going to do weekly reverse prospecting or run Facebook ads and then not do it, right? And that can be part of your weekly update is, hey, we ran this Facebook ad this week and it had this many searches, right? It may or may not have generated any showings, but you can show them that you're being proactive. Because one of the biggest complaints of a seller going expired and not renewing is lack of communication from their agent. So if you stay in communication with them every single week, even if you don't have a lot to tell them, they're going to really appreciate that. Put yourselves in the eyes of the seller. Think about when you sold a home. Could you imagine selling your home, maybe being in a bit of a panic? There's a lot of tension going on and you have no idea what's going on because you haven't heard from your agents for weeks. That's what happens. So always put yourself in the mind of the seller. Don't fall victim to the market. You need to shift and adjust appropriately, especially right now. You have to pay attention to the market. So what that means is just because you evaluated a price 30 days ago does not mean that's what the price should be today. So you need to continue to do your market search, look at the comparables, because one comparable could adjust your property either up or down, right? Do you need to schedule price adjustments? We talked about that. The next thing is part of your marketing plan, who will pay for staging and photos? Now, in my opinion, this should be a part of your marketing plan. It should come from the agent, but I know that sometimes that's not always feasible. So, what is that going to look like? Are you going to ask the sellers to pay up front and you deduct it, at the closing table, or are you going to pay it up front? What is that going to look like? So for me, as I mentioned, I look at every single listing as an investment because I've invested, let's say, up to $400 before I even put my sign in the yard. So what I do in order to protect myself, and I've, thank goodness never had to use this, but if I just write in additional provisions, and again, check with your broker first. If the seller cancels or breaches this agreement, the seller is to reimburse the listing agent for an amount up to X amount for the staging consult and photos. Okay, so they know that I'm willing to pay those things up front, but they're going to reimburse me. Let's say if they put it on the market and 2 weeks later they change their mind, then they understand that I'm already out those costs and it's not due to anything that I've done as a listing agent, right? I'm not talking about when your listing expires. I'm only talking if they cancel or breach the contract. And then in the MLS, we talked about it a little bit, but fill out everything as possible to hit more searches. It's just completely lazy. And I'm not talking about you have to go and measure every single room and those things, but really the important information that buyers would be searching for. Okay, so make sure that you're putting in as much information as possible. And then if you do decide to do a broker's open, don't be one of those that just throw it together last minute. They email or text it out to all the agents, the day before, the day of. I hate those. So I do what's called broker's extravaganza. Of course, it's a little bit difficult right now with COVID-19, but once things kind of open back up, this was one that I did years ago when I used to list for a local builder. And you can see here, we took months to plan this. And because we had several spec homes, we had several homes that were going to be involved in this. As I mentioned, it was for a builder, but we had over $15,000 in prizes. Now, the interesting thing with this very broker's open, no, it was actually one before this that we did that was pretty similar to this. This one was in May. But there was one before that was our largest attended brokers open ever. And the interesting thing is there was like 2 feet of snow on the ground. We almost canceled. But I still remember us, we were out there shoveling all the snow off the driveway, and we said one of two things can happen. Nobody can show up and we reschedule, or everybody has cabin fever and they want to get out of the house and they attend. And we could not get more people in those homes. I mean, you could hardly walk. So one of the reasons is, I mean, all the prizes you can see here, there were Thunder tickets, there were iPads, and I didn't spend a penny out of my own pocket as a listing agent, but I used my vendor list. I used my contacts, and it was a mutual benefit. So what we did was we had various sponsorships. So we had A, B, and C, and each sponsorship level had a minimum price point, and they got different things, right? So some of the maybe lesser ones, they would just have their name on the flyer. Some of the middle line, they'd have their name in their flyer and they could attend. And then the higher price point ones could attend. They actually got a booth, and they would get a full list of everybody that attended, because we would capture all their information by, capturing their business cards. So with that, it just took a little extra time. I had to make a few extra phone calls, but we sold 4 homes off this very broker's open. And these homes, prior to me coming in, there were some that were not built yet and some that had sat there. Some of them had 2 birthdays before I came in, and we sold them just a matter of a couple months. So it was just being about thinking creatively, thinking out of the box, and doing more than just listing into the MLS. Okay. This might be a great place if we have any questions. Anybody have any questions yet?
I was just going to ask about your stager. What's a typical cost for those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really depends on the size of the home. I also use her to stage my vacant homes for my my own personal investments and flip property. So of course that's, you're getting into the thousands. But a staging consult, I mean, it can run anywhere from probably $150 to $250, depending on the size. And then my
Thank you.
photographer about the same. So that's where I said, on average, I probably invest around $400, give or take, before I put my sign in the yard. But it makes all the difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anybody else? See what time it is here. Okay, got a little bit more and then we'll go toward a break. So ask yourself, and this is going back to the Brokers Open, what makes you different? What are you willing to do different than all the other 3,000 agents that are a part of our local board, right? All 24 of you on this call today should not be in competition with one another, okay? So what I recommend is a book. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend it. But essentially what it is the Blue Ocean Strategy is a simultaneous pursuit of differentiation and low cost to open up a new market space and create a new demand. It's about creating and capturing uncontested market space, thereby making the competition irrelevant. So how many of us, we've all looked at a real estate agents, well, I don't want to share my secrets because you're my competition. That is the wrong mindset. You want to have an abundance mindset. And when you're willing to help others and you do things so differently, then you won't view them as competition, right? And I'm a firm believer of that. So check out the Blue Ocean Strategy and then look at how can you now play with the sharks in the open blue sea and not at the reef where all the other little fish are, right? I mean, I know it sounds silly, but that's really what we're dealing with here. So I actually asked a couple of our top producers in our brokerage of what were the top 5 things that made a successful listing agent. And guys, these are agents doing a lot of listings. And with no doubt, the number one thing everybody said was mindset and consistency. Mindset and consistency. But as far as tactical things, here were the things that they talked about: professional photos, communication, pricing strategy, home prep, and then a tool belt of vendors, which we just talked about with the Brokers Open. So photos, you're not doing anybody in favor, including yourself, by taking cell phone photos or taking pictures yourself. I come from a broadcasting background, so I can take decent photos, but I'm not a professional photographer. And so I need to be real with myself. I'm doing myself an injustice and my sellers an injustice by taking photos myself, okay? Communication. In over 10 years that I've been doing this, I have had one transaction bust over inspections. I know agents out there, but that's because I'm solution based. But I know agents out there that literally every time something happens, they freeze, they don't know how to communicate, and the whole entire transaction goes down the drain. Most of the time, unless it's just something completely unforeseen or this, one of the buyers or sellers are being unrealistic, but 99% of the time you can save a deal. Okay. I'll say that again. 99% of the time you can save the deal, but it's by your own communication. Are you informing the sellers or the buyers of all their different options, or are you making the decision for them? The next one, we talked about pricing strategy. If they're wanting to overprice, don't take the listing. And one of my mentors taught me this years ago, and I've always had it stuck in my head. He said, Micah, let the listing go. You're not going to get paid on it anyway. So if you never believe that you're going to get paid on that listing, then just simply don't take it. Okay. And then home prep, we've talked about that. Don't be in a rush to just go throw the house on the market. You should have it properly scheduled out, literally scheduled. You should have the listing agreement. You should have the staging scheduled, the photographer scheduled, and then scheduled on what day it's going to go live. I mean, look at it as kind of a theatrical event. When is it going to go live? And I actually have a day and time when I tend to put my listings because I believe that that's when buyers are kind of ramping up. So really consider a schedule and don't just be in a rush to throw it on the market. And then your tool belt of vendors. Have as many contacts as possible. As you can see, I have multiple vendors. Now, it doesn't mean I can use all the lenders, I can use all the title companies, but they all know that I provide value for them and I can connect them with real estate agents. So even though I may not use them all personally, I have an entire tool belt. If somebody calls me now, I can get you a sponsorship, right? So make sure that you're networking and you're creating those relationships with those vendors, even if you're not using them today. All right. I actually think this is a pretty good place to take a break. I know I have the break a little bit further down here, but we'll go ahead and take just a 2-minute break. I'll pause. If anybody has any questions, I'll just mute myself. Well, let's actually just say 4 minutes. So right here at 11 o'clock, we'll start back up. And feel free, I'm sticking around if anybody has any questions. All right, everybody back on here? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Now, keep in mind, I may ask you some questions, so make sure that you're sticking around for the whole time. So prepare to list. It's your signature. I have here just kind of some before and after photos. These are photos that I took with my phone. These are actually is actually listing a rental property I have of mine. My mouse is so sensitive with these things, that I have on the market and actually went under contract within, I think, 24 hours. So you can see the significant differences here. Let me minimize the video between the before and after. I mean, it just, staging again makes all the difference. So professional staging consult, one of the other reasons why I like them is they get to be the bad guy, right? AKA the professional. So they're the ones that get to tell them to take all their personal pictures down and that they have a lot of clutter and they, need to rearrange their furniture. So it really makes me kind of separate myself, and they get to be the bad guy, which they don't mind. And I like that. So your stager needs to be familiar with your photographer. The reason why this is so important, my stager and my photographer, they know one another. They know that I'm very loyal to both of them. And so when my stager stages, she knows actually what angles my photographer is most likely to take, and really stages around that. So she's not a decorator. She is staging to maximize the space and to appeal to the buyer. So she will literally, if you guys can see me, I'm putting my hands up right now. She kind of she looks at the angle of where the photographer is going to look. And of course, with any listing, you want to focus on the 3Ds, which is depersonalize, declutter, and unfortunately, deodorize. I had a house that somebody else did a broker's open. It was a house a couple doors down. It was almost $1 million listing for my old property. And I went in and just this cloud of dog odor just came over me, and I couldn't even handle to walk through the house. So you have to be real with them, because you can have the best looking house, but if it reeks, and especially people with allergies, you're just eliminating your buyer pool. So that may mean you need to deodorize, or you need to, rip up the carpet before you list. So you've got to be real with them. Protect your valuables, medications, and guns or firearms. We've talked about that already. That's really important to go over with them, but the stager should go over that as well. The other thing I'm preparing to list, and if you notice on here, I have, it's your signature. Look at every listing. When you stick the sign in the yard, consider it your signature. Your name is now tied to that property. So if it doesn't look the best that it possibly could on the MLS, that's your name. That's your future clients. That's what your future clients are going to look at, because that hurts your statistics. And so you want to be able to show them that you know what you're talking about. So your listing needs to be eye candy, right? That's the first thing. Your primary photo is where the buyers will decide if they want a showing or not. Okay. And rotate through the magazine quality photos. What I mean is rotate through on the primary photo about every week or every other week. That does kind of help optimize the listing. But when I talk about your primary photo is where the buyers will decide if they want a showing or not. My personal home, I just sold about a month ago, but I lived in Mulholland, and this house was on the market for over a year. I had seen it time and time again come through on the search. I had no interest in looking at the property because the photos, frankly, were horrible. And so my husband was like, let's just go take a look at it. We went and looked, we made an offer, and we're under contract that day. But it was because it didn't look anything like the listing. And so make sure your listing, I don't want it to be too fake. I want it to look as if when the buyers are there. You don't want them also to get there and your listing looks so good online, but it doesn't look like that in person. So ask yourself, does your listing feel warm and inviting? And the reason why I have this on there, so this is a before and after. This is an agent that had a listing that I sold last year before me. And as you can see, they appeared to do all the right things. They hired a professional photographer, but the key is they didn't hire a stager, right? And if you can see the photos, which one looks warm and inviting and which one looks dark. And if you notice, they had been on the market 4 months with hardly any showings and no offers. We went in there, my stager went in there, I went in there with my stager. We both agreed that painting the cabinets would make a huge difference. So our sellers agreed to make about a 2-week investment and have their cabinets professionally painted. And you can see the difference here. We sold the house over asking for more money than it was originally listed for in 6 days, right? Now, I know timing is everything. It just takes one buyer. But would you guys agree that you can see some significant differences between these professional photos and these professional photos? Would anybody like to open up their mic and just talk about some of the differences that they see? And granted, we didn't change the paint on the walls, only the kitchen cabinets. Anybody?
Hi, this is Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
So from the difference of the two, I would say the one that's painted it's looks more spacious. It's has a like a warm, homey feel compared to the other one. The picture from the outside um, shows a lot more brightness and attractiveness to the home than the other one, which looks like it was taken right before or in the evening or something.
Right. Yeah, I actually only have 2 of the photos, but if you look through the entire listing, yeah, you can tell they took it at night, and I mean, it just made everything dark. So timing makes a huge difference.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback.
And Micah,
Yes.
this is Lisa.
Hey,
Will you expand on this a little bit, maybe at a later time in this session? I don't want to leave this point, but I'm wondering how you navigate that conversation of an investment to that degree and get their buy-in. And I guess that's, again, where your tool belt of vendors comes in handy too.
Right, absolutely. No, I'm be happy to go over it right now. So, as I mentioned, I walked through the house with my stager, so they could see it was a live conversation that my stager and I were having in front of them. And I don't know if you can notice in this one, they had a lot of white trim everywhere else, but we got them. Even you see the fireplace back here, we got them to go ahead and paint that as well, in the little office, because everything else was white. And the reason why is we showed them, or I showed them rather, the other listings that were active on the market and what had sold, and everything else was warm, inviting, it was a little more modern. And so it just really boiled down to, okay, you've already had your home on the market for 4 months. And then the other thing is, remember when I said rate your sellers on a scale of 1 to 10 on how motivated they are? So these sellers were ready to move. So now I'm coming in as the professional, where the other one just kind of threw it on the market and just didn't make any suggestions. And I said, I realize this is going to, be 2 weeks longer that we get on the market. I realize that painting the cabinets is going to be a mess. And I realize that this is going to be an additional expense. But I promise you, it's going to make the world of a difference, right? So just when you talk to them firm and, like I said, kind of control the conversation, but not in a manipulative or a salesy way, they will respect you a lot more as a professional. And so then I would just say, well, you know what, before we make any decisions, let's get a couple painters out here and let's get a few estimates. And from there, you've mentally gotten them to commit, because once they commit mentally and verbally to accepting to have some estimates come out, then they're basically saying, okay, I understand what you're saying. I understand that this is valuable to check into, right? But if your seller's not motivated, now this may or may not have been a deal breaker, but I just wanted you to see the differences of it. Did make a simple thing made a huge difference. And by the way, this seller, they were actually a referral to me. She has now referred me probably 3 different clients, probably gotten a couple $1 million in sales from this one person. And it's because we did our job right.
Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure. Anybody else?
I'd kind of like to, I have a question. This is Lisa Lacron. I wanted to go back to the staging. I've seen a couple of the agents in my office use virtual staging. rather than actually putting in furniture, which, then once you get to the home there, we always put in towels in the bathroom and stuff like that, and maybe a picture in the corner. But what are your thoughts about using that if you don't want to put out a lot of money towards buying or renting, if you will, the furniture? What do you think about the virtual staging idea?
Yeah, and this is just my personal opinion. I am not a fan of virtual staging at all. Number one, I personally believe it could be a liability. I've seen people add like fires to the fireplace and things like that. Well, how do you know the fireplace is working, right? So I personally think it could be a liability, or putting things that are too big that kind of distort the size of the room. And number one, it's not just to get people for the showings, but you want the showing to go as well as possible as well. So, I mean, I literally can't tell you how many times we have de-staged and buyers have gone to the final walkthrough, and they're almost like a little disappointed. They're like, wow, it looks a lot different. And I'm like, I know, but you got to look at the space, not just the furniture. Um, and not to say that we're not deceiving them in any way, but you want the showings to look as best as possible. So keep in mind, I'm not asking necessarily for you as the agent to pay for all the furniture stage, because the likeliness, I mean, that's quite a bit of an investment. But I would ask my sellers to do that, and I let them know personally. So you may or may not be able to say this, but I say, hey, I put my money where my mouth is. This stager has staged every single one of my properties for years, including my own personal properties. So I would just show them the differences. I mean, just give them before and after examples like this and let them decide. But to go back to your question of virtual staging, I'm personally, if you do it, that's great. I'm personally not a fan, and I don't think you'll ever see me using virtual staging.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, no problem. All right, so the next thing is when we're preparing to list, so we've looked at the staging, we've looked at the photography, now we need to do our market analysis. So we talked about already, give your sellers a ballpark price range and then set a schedule of price improvements. I hate, price reduction. I always use the word price improvement. And then you want to look at what's the average days on a market. All this MLS, or all this data, can be found on your MLS. So what's the average days on market? Because you want to set your proper expectations. So you may go in with your marketing plan and say, hey, on average, my homes sell, in 7 days or less, but these particular neighborhoods, you've got some new construction around the corner, we're an existing home, they may take up to 90 days is what the statistics are showing me. So you want to really set up the expectations, because if I just go in there to the seller interview and I say my home sells 7 days or less, well, on day 8, what do you think they're doing? They're freaking out because their home isn't under contract yet. So I let them know my personal statistics, but then I'm also going to let them know what the market is showing me. So I've got a couple right now that are, surrounded by new construction. So they do take longer. And I let them know that, moving in, said, hey, this is where we need to be. We need to be in competitive with a new construction, because if we're not competitive in our price point with new construction and they have an existing home that's comparable to a new construction, which one do you think the buyers are going to choose? They're going to go with new construction. Excuse me, grab some water here. My allergies are bad today. So, pull the average days on market specific to their area. The market, though, should not dictate your success. So just because the market is showing that there's not very many buyers in that price point, that means you just need to work that much harder. So right now, I just got a over about $550,000 listing under contract in a week. And the stats right now are showing that there's not a huge buyer pool in $500,000 or more. So I had explained that to them, but I just knew I had to work that much harder for the success to get that listing under contract. Excuse me. So know how long it should take to sell the home. You set up the proper expectations so that way they don't get mad at you later on. How do the other active listings look in comparison to yours? What's the average price point in your market, and does your listing fall below or above? So who can tell me the average price point in Oklahoma City right now?
I'm not sure, but my guess would be 200.
Right. Absolutely. So I think we're just shy. I think last I checked, it was like around 186. So you want to explain to them that if you're, pulling a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 listing, then their buyer pool is going to get smaller. Or if you're under 100,000, then your buyer pool may get smaller as well. So you just kind of need to become familiar with those statistics. And is it a large or small buyer pool? Where do your buyers currently come from? Okay. So I often, we'll look in the neighborhood. I might look at some that even, sold quickly or took a little while to sell, and call the listing agent up. Say, hey, do you know any other buyers in the area? Or what were some of your challenges with this? We should all be collaborative no matter what brokerage you're with. So, don't hesitate to reach out and work with other listing agents that are in the neighborhood. All right, maximum exposure, both online and offline visibility, farm a neighborhood and create a buyer waiting list for showings and open houses, etc. So if you do an open house, you're obviously looking to sell the primary home, but also create a buyer waiting list. So that way, when that home sells, you can now go market to the surrounding homes, let them know that you just sold this house in 7 days or less, that you have a buyer list waiting that are looking for the exact same type of home. And that's going to help increase you to get more showings. Create a full service marketing program to get your home more visibility online and offline. Combining traditional and tech savvy tools. So I have some of them here. List in the MLS, yard sign, lockbox, accurate showing instruction, text codes, social media postings, Facebook exposure, reverse prospecting, open house, brokers open, syndication, LinkedIn, mailers, etc. So the list goes on and on and on. Depending on what type of home, you might kind of specialize your marketing plan around that. We already had our break, so keep moving forward. So weekly follow-up, keep your seller in the know. We talked about doing weekly updates. Personally, I like to do them on Mondays because then if we did have an open house, or one of my agents did an open house, I usually ask them to text me just kind of a brief summary, and I'll send that over to the seller. So I like Monday because I can let them know kind of what we did the week prior before. List reports is a great way. Consistent communication, we talked about that. Feedback automated and through showing assist. So what I mean through that is, of course, I have the automated feedback turned on. But as we all know, some of us are horrible at giving feedback. So I often give them about 24 hours. And if they haven't given any feedback through the automated system, then I find if I message them through showing assist, I get a better response than I actually text their personal cell phone. I don't know what it is. I guess because showing assist, it sends like a notification and an email. I will get more feedback from the showing assist than if I text message them personally on their cell phone. So I don't know what it is, but that's just what I have found. Showings automatically text and email all sellers. Share with them advertising. So even, let me go back to this, automatically text and email all sellers. Even if the property is vacant, they have the right to know when they're having showings and kind of keep track of how many showings they're having. Share with them all the advertising. So if you ran a Facebook ad the following week, share with them some of the statistics on that. Share with them the ad. Don't be a secret agent. What I mean by that is add your sellers and buyers on social media and tag them. Okay, they want to see that you're real and that you care. And who knows, when you tag them, somebody in their sphere might be interested. So show that you care, and that's not just a transaction. So I know a lot of us are trying to get more signs in the yard, trying to get a certain amount of transactions, but we have to still, we are in a service-based business. So you want to show them that you care, and it's not just about numbers for you as well. Consistency matters. Remember when I talked about that I had interviewed some top producers and they talked about mindset and consistency. So show your results. No obligation cancellation guarantee shows that you mean business. So, you can give them the right if you want to cancel the listing agreement. Again, check with your broker. But you could put some additional clauses in there that if they were to do that, they just reimburse you for expense. Most of the time they won't do that, but it just shows that you're serious and that you guarantee your work. Share your personal average days on market versus the average agent. So for example, you could say the average agent sells in 22 days, but my personal average is 7 days, whatever that may be. Post on social media on a regular basis. We talked about don't be a secret agent. Add listings to Facebook Marketplace and then renew those weekly. So I go in every single week and I renew them and I post to certain Facebook groups. Also post listings several times per week on Craigslist. Craigslist is not dead. You can still pick up a lot of leads on Craigslist, share listings with potential prospect in Facebook groups. And then we've already mentioned the reverse prospecting, send a personalized message to agents and share a virtual tour link. Especially right now, I would do a virtual tour link because not just for buyer leads, but also for your sellers. I'm reassuring my sellers that we're sending out the virtual tour link before they schedule a showing. So that way they're pretty serious when they come to look at the property and we're not having unnecessary traffic. So optimize your listing, schedule of price improvements, rotate through the primary photo, renew on all social media platforms, optimize on your website. You can do that by even writing some blogs about your listing with some keywords and kind of optimize to hit some of the Google searches. Share listing through lead capture tools. Email listing to your active leads that match. YouTube, do a short video tour. I have a couple on YouTube right now that I did with my phone. I intentionally did not do them professionally because I feel like when it comes to video, people actually appreciate something a little less professional, but it still looks nice. We've already talked about the Oklahoma listing of the week. Offer bonuses or higher commissions so agents will face objections for you, right? That's one kind of technique that you can use because the fact of the matter is most buyer's agents are just out showing. They're not doing what I call, the 3x3 where they're only showing 3 homes. And so they're not really willing to face a lot of the objections. They kind of just care to get something under contract. So give them some kind of incentive to where they're particularly focusing on your listing and facing objections that may come on for you. So landing pages, lead capture, and text codes. So don't share your listings through third-party websites. You're giving your leads away. What I mean by this, I see over and over and over again, agents sharing leads or sharing their listings through Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever it may be. And that's one of the worst things that you can do because what those companies are doing is now going and selling those leads basically to somebody else. So you want to have some kind of lead capture tool to be able to engage, to be able to capture their information and keep the leads in-house, okay? Create a specialized landing page or squeeze page for only your listing and put the link in all advertising. Or you can create custom text codes instead of an old flyer. We talked about that a little bit where, they can text a certain smart number. I get their information on the back end and I can call them while they're on they're still in front of the house. So I'm just going to show you real quick what a squeeze page for those of you that don't know might look like. So this is a listing that I have currently in Norman. I just click on the link. And I'm not going to get too detailed into this, but I just wanted you to be familiar what it is. So as you can see, it's kind of like a virtual tour page specific to this property. Has all the information, it pulls all the data, syndicates from the MLS. And then if you scroll through the photos, I'm already logged in, so it's not asking me, but usually about after the second or the third photo, it's going to ask them to log in to be able to see more. So on the back end, you capture that information. So that's what I mean by a squeeze page or a landing page in the lead capture. All right, reevaluate beyond the 3 Ps. So what are the 3 Ps? This is what most agents do. You put a sign in the yard, you put it into the MLS, and then you pray and hope that it sells. So what I want you to evaluate is what is the 4th P for you? That could be you prospecting for active buyers for the listing. You're being proactive. You're providing value. What is the 4th P? What can you do beyond what 99% of us are doing, right? So always think about does anybody have a 4th P that they want to share?
Being proactive, especially on the feedback.
Love it. Yep. Feedback makes a huge difference. I wish more of us participated with it.
I'm just being funny and showing you all my St. Joseph when I'm really desperate to bury in the yard.
Sarah, while I got you on here, you do a lot of Facebook Lives. So do you have any feedback or any pro tips on that?
So you don't have to be perfect. I mean, half the time I don't have any makeup on. Who cares? It's about the house. Don't feel like you're going to be watched by a million people. It's not the Academy Awards. My clients always share it. So after I do a Facebook Live like walkthrough of a new listing, the client always shares it, and then they're looking at all the comments that I get, and it just makes it look like you're selling a lot of houses even if you aren't. So mine, it's like my real listings. But if you want more listings, just have like, here's a listing of the day, and go find a vacant listing and do a walkthrough tour. And then when people have a house to sell, they'll think, oh, and she's going to do it on Facebook Live, and I'll get to be the listing of the day.
Awesome. I love it. Anybody else do a lot of live Facebook Lives or Instagram? Got to get on there more.
So the funniest thing, so my friend Jolene, she's like a perfectionist. She's normally just my hype girl in the background. Like I talk and she's like, hi. But one time I made her do a Facebook Live, and she did it on this beautiful new construction house. And there's all these different filters that you can choose. And it was like when Jurassic Park was coming out, and there's this dinosaur that's out in the video. We don't know how it got there, and it's like flapping its tail around. It walks around. It was the funniest video ever, because we're showing this house with a dinosaur in it. And then everyone's commenting. It got more comments, more likes than any other video we've ever done. And we're like, the dinosaur comes with the house, but it's friendly. But it was just so funny. So have fun with it.
I love that. That's a great example. And that's where I was saying, you know, I really don't hire a lot of professionals for video, because I believe they would prefer something a little more natural when it comes to video. So Sarah, would you agree with that? She's shaking her head yes.
Yep. Yep. Be a real person, because if you want everything to be perfect, then it won't ever get done. And if you're waiting for a professional to schedule them out, it's just going to delay things.
So you're saying the fourth P should not be a perfectionist.
Exactly.
Awesome. Anybody else? Great feedback. So deal or no deal? I'm just checking the time here. So many agents will take their clients out of the will talk their clients rather, we'll take them and talk them out of the transaction. As I mentioned, I've heard this over and over again. Our language is key. So when you show that you're insecure about the conversation, they're going to feel that. So don't scare your buyer, but rather use facts and be solution oriented. Okay. So here's what we have to deal with. What is the solution? How can we move forward? Okay. Work well with the other agent, as we all should be cooperating together. So we are not enemies by any means. I can't stress that one enough. Stay on top of all communication. Keep your paperwork aligned and organized. This one will help keep you out of real estate jail. So depending on what your brokerage does, I mean, make sure that your paperwork is in order. Don't assume or make decisions for your clients. This one, I'd love if I could highlight it. I've literally had conversations with other agents where they make a decision on the phone, and my response is, don't you think you need to call your client? Because last I checked, we were just a communicator or the messenger. So people know, they see right through it, and that will get you in trouble. I actually had one not too long ago that the agent failed to communicate something to their buyers, and then post-closing, there was something that happened. So don't be that person. Communicate everything. Continue to stay on top of trends and best practices. Engage and collaborate with other agents. Again, we talked about we're all cooperating together. I love collaborating. Stay firm on all contract timelines. Don't be one of those that, you know, oh, well, this is just kind of a soft timeline. No, you need to look at the earnest money timelines and the inspection timelines and everything else, and make sure that you're staying on top of that. And then work well with vendors who assist in close timelines. One thing that I do as well, as soon as I get something under contract, instead of just sending out the executed contract, I copy the other agent, I copy the sellers, or which other buyer or seller, whichever one I'm representing, the title company, and the lender if I have it, and I spell everything out. I let them know that the executed contract is attached. I also put the buyer's name, the seller's name, the listing agent, selling agent, the closer, the lender, the purchase price, any concessions, and the closing date. And that way everything is spelled out in one email, and your client can save it. But also, I am not just being dependent on the other agent sending everything into title. I've already done it because I've asked them who their preferred title person is. So you'd be shocked how many agents forget to turn stuff into title until last minute. So don't be that person. Just be proactive. Ask them who their preferred title person is, what their email, and just send out one mass email, have everything spelled out, and it just makes you look a little more professional. Become a professional negotiator. So the number one thing in becoming a professional negotiator is eliminate your ego. You want to look strictly at the numbers, and you want to take out the emotion to it. Okay. Your buyers or sellers will sense when you're going after just the commission and not for everybody's best interest into the transaction. Every seller is motivated with the right terms. I got one probably a week ago in the feedback and said, how motivated is your seller? And I sent it, I did not respond. I sent it to my seller and I asked him, how would you like me to respond? And they said, well, that's dumb. Every seller is motivated with the right terms. So again, don't go and use this as a way to open up all kinds of information that could get you in trouble. I didn't answer it. I sent it to my seller and I asked them, how would you like me to respond to this? CMA, pull the closest 3 solds in the size, age, and quality of the home. And then ask, how did your buyers come up with that number? So if you get the feedback, or maybe you get a low ball offer in your opinion, instead of getting all offended or defensive about the offer, because remember, as the agent, we are just the communicator and the messenger. So I just simply ask, how did your buyers come up with that number? And a lot of times they can't answer it, or they didn't pull the comps, or you can kind of dig in and find a little more information. So don't give away your client's terms without prior permission. We talked about that with being motivated. That's not an opportunity to go and say, well, they're moving out of state or whatever. Don't give away their terms. Continue to work with new buyers until it's executed. Let all parties stay in the know. So as soon as I know I'm expecting an offer, I let the future showings know, hey, we're expecting an offer. Nothing is executed yet. Just wanted to give you a heads up. And most people really respect that. And I do that because years ago, I went to show a home right on the spot, called the listing agent, said, we're ready to put an offer. And she's like, oh, it went under contract an hour ago. Okay, well, thank you for wasting my time and letting me bring my buyers here. Keep everybody in the know and just respect everyone's time and cancel showings if needed, or at least let them know there's a potentially an offer on the table. Understand the differentiator between the list price and the sales price. That's what I put this little chart here. Actually pulled this one up just based on this year. So just because, let your sellers know, just because we're listing at 200, where is that going to be in conjunction with your sales price? Consider all the terms, not just the sales price. So again, is it a contingency? Is there going to be inspection contingencies? Are there other concessions? What is that? You have to take all that into consideration. And then really practice your scripts. I think somebody talked about that earlier, is how do you get them to commit to, a stager? Practice your scripts, because scripts are the anatomy of the conversation. So once you practice that and you're confident with that conversation, then you'll be able to convince them for the most part that they need to make that investment. We are the messenger or a communicator. So the 7 Ds of communication: don't be unprofessional, don't answer for your client, don't take it personal, but also be decisive. Direct the conversation. So we're not being manipulative, but we are directing the conversation. Drive everything to a solution, and then don't talk too much. Because when you talk too much, you can actually talk your clients out of the transaction. So what is your hourly worth? We've already talked about that. And when you know that, you're going to be able to leverage and delegate. How many listings can you appropriately handle? How many items can you delegate? So what items rather can you delegate? And some examples may be showing assistants, transaction coordinators, virtual assistants, licensed assistants. Delegate could be things, maybe you say, hey, I don't need a full-time assistant, but you can still delegate through things like Fiverr. You can hire for, transaction-based activities for $5 or more. There's companies out there that have shared virtual assistants where you don't have to hire them full-time, or you can just hire by the task oriented. A lot of brokerages even have things that are transaction coordinators and such. So when you think about the money that you're spending to hire out, instead of looking at the investment, you want to look at how much are you giving up in time and money by not leveraging. And you'll be able to answer that question once you know your hourly worth. So the last thing I have here is we all have the same 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. So time is just an excuse. Some of us just leverage better than others. And that was actually my Tony Robbins coach told me that. She said Tony Robbins owns 52 companies worth billions of dollars, and yet he is the same 24/7. So she did not take anybody using time as an excuse very well. So some of us just leverage better than others. So don't use I don't have enough time as an excuse any longer. Also, Tony Robbins created this, the 5 levels of mastery is creation. So what do you want out of this? Implementation. So I encourage you to implement things that you have learned from today. Write down the top 3 things that you want to take away and be able to implement immediately. And then once you start implementing and you make that a habit, you're going to build that momentum in your business, and then you'll stabilize. And that's where you truly become a master. So mastery is a possession of great knowledge, skills, and habits that you make the master of you. And unfortunately, this all starts with the very first slide that we talked about. What is your why? Because that's really in the creation phase. If your why is not big enough, then it's not going to push you in the hard times to become and fulfill mastery. All right, I'm going to open it up. We're coming here toward the end and see if you guys have any questions, comments. I'll go ahead and mute my mic. Going to make me call on some of you. Let's see, we've got Julie. Do you have any questions or comments? Brittany Roberts.
Micah.
Yes.
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier your business plan, your one-page business plan, and that you would be happy to share it. Would you remind us how to do that?
Yeah, I'll actually, if you want to just shoot me a quick text or email, here's my information, and I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
Hey, Micah. Brittany Roberts here. I was trying to unmute. Sorry.
You're fine. Appreciate it.
You know, at this point, I've been taking notes. I really don't have any questions. I'm just trying to, take in what you're saying. And I have learned some new things, and I absolutely love how you keep including Tony Robbins. I've been a fan of his for years.
Awesome.
And so
to hear.
That's just really cool. So thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. I'm glad to hear that you're a Tony Robbins fan. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, yes. He's amazing. And so are you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have a quick question.
Oh, yes. Who is that?
Okay, so I had a seller. We went under contract. It was a multiple offer situation. A buyer came in with a, fairly high offer, but not out of the comps. And so we were pretty confident going into the appraisal that everything was going to be good. The house had been completely remodeled. It was in a pretty hot area. And then the appraisal came back extremely low, so low that the buyer's agent was even surprised and was just like, I cannot believe that this is so low. So how do you handle that? We ended up making, we met in the middle where they came up from the appraisal, but the seller had to come down from the initial offer. And it was really disappointing, especially to my seller, just because we had everything going for us, and then the appraisal threatened to bust the deal. So how do you handle when an appraisal comes down that, that you both agree is lower than what it should be, and they're not willing to adjust it?
Right. And I loved how you were solution-based and you were able to still make it work. So we go back to setting up the proper expectations. So I always let my sellers know when we're going under contract that we have 3 negotiation periods. The first one is once we get an executed contract, The second one is after inspections, and the third one is the appraisal. So I really set up those expectations that this is what you and I feel like it should be priced at, and this is what the market's telling us. But they also need to understand that appraisals are completely subjective, right? I mean, we all know that. You can have two appraisers come up with completely different items. So let them know that it's subjective, but to be solution oriented, I think in that situation, I would definitely get your managing broker involved. And, a lot of times you can get back with the lender or the appraiser and, request a reevaluation. Now, depending if it's FHA or, what the terms are, they may or may not do anything and it may stick with the property. So that's just kind of reality, and the sellers have to understand those circumstances. So, but I think if everybody's in agreement, you could definitely go back to I forgot what the exact term is called, but you can go back to the appraiser and ask them to reevaluate. They may or may not do it, unfortunately. Awesome. Anybody else?
Micah, another question, kind of off target, but you had so many great points here today that I would love to expand on in that lead generation piece that we kind of talked about at the very beginning. Do you have a class on that?
I do. I actually have a class on how to generate 100 leads in 10 days. So I don't know when my next one is, but shoot me your information and I can certainly let you know.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Awesome. Well, I appreciate everybody for sticking around. I promised that we would get out a little bit early since we didn't take as many breaks and as many questions as in class. But if you guys have any questions, I mean, even after this class, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Got my information on here. So I've got my cell phone and my email, and I hope everybody stays safe and, go after those listings because they're out there. So don't be a victim to the market.